Hey folks, how you doing today? Right now it's mid-April and I've been trying to do my best to keep up with my garden maintenance, including edging my gardens. And I've got the edges pretty much exactly where I want them. And I thought maybe now would be as good a time as any to just talk to you folks a little bit about not so much how to edge a garden, but more where to edge a garden. You know, fundamentals of edging. Maybe we'll call this fundamentals of garden edging. And I just want to walk you around the yard a bit and show you how I do things, why I do things, the method to my madness. So maybe when you're out working your own yard, you can apply these tips as well. What I'd like to do is start on this edge right here, which this is the first time I've ever tried to edge this garden. I haven't really edged it yet. What I've done is just marked where I want the edge to be and killed all the grass on the inside. But as I'm walking down this edge, I just want you to notice the smoothness to it, the gradual flowing curves, and then take a look up here. You see where it pops out the farthest? Initially, when I cut that edge, where it pops farther, I had two small swoops, but it just didn't look right. It was too much. So what I went back and did is actually make a second line farther out for one smooth flowing edge. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, just try to keep your edges smooth, flowing, and somewhat gradual. And you see this bench over here. What I'm going to end up doing is I just stuck that bench there years ago, but I'm actually going to, get a machine, pick that up, and put the bench pretty much where the robin is sitting there, the farthest point back, so you can just come right to the edge of the lawn, sit on the bench, and look around. And this poor robin's going to be moving now. But now here, as you can see, I also had a little bit of trouble where up there, you see how I've got the double swoop and it just doesn't look right? Hopefully you're seeing that. To me, it doesn't look right. So what I did is I went back and I actually made a second line, which I have to go back and kill the grass. But out here as well is just going to be one big flowing swoop. That's the moral of the story, is really just big flowing swoops. So I just want to turn back and look this way again. And you don't want to have huge changes in where the edge is going. You want kind of gradual flowing curves. They're easier to maintain as far as re-edging goes, but they're also a lot easier to mow. I remember years ago, I did some work at a house where somebody had just cut a ton of edges, and every 10 feet there was a different curve and through the landscape, and it was just so cut up into little pieces. It didn't have the flow. It's a pretty windy day today, so I apologize if the audio is kind of lousy. But this is another good example of edges that I like on the right here. And it's just a gradual S curve, very easy to mow, very easy to maintain. You can run your spade along it to re-edge it in the spring, or your edging tool, and then you can run your weed whacker along it, every week or two through the season to clean that up. Now over here, I can't say that this is really my favorite edge. I like the way it kind of curves like that, and it was my thought to someday put a plant in the middle of that. In a situation like this, what I think would be really cool is just get a tape measure and measure out a set number of feet and cut the edge literally the exact same on both sides. You've got this tongue of grass. I may just take the narrowest point from the tip of this bed over and then carry that distance down the other way. And then it's just one back and forth with my lawnmower. When you're edging gardens and you come to where the driveway is, or the end of the garden, or a sidewalk, you want to try to hit them. I took a design course years ago, and the instructor said you want to hit them at 90 degrees. I kind of feel like as long as you're above 45 degrees, that's a good place to be. But what you really want to do is just avoid having this like little narrow tongue of grass coming out, because it's a pain to mow, and it's also going to dry out quicker and be more likely to get torn up. I don't really have a set rule of how much should be mulch or the landscape and how much should be lawn, but I do just try to avoid having just like a little tongue of either mulch or grass, because it just doesn't look right, and in the end it's going to end up, you know, dying, drying out, or getting kicked and not look right the rest of the season. And here's another example where the lawn hits the driveway, so I'm pretty close to 90 degrees here. That's really only because it was the only way that this bed could end. And if we walk down the bed, you'll see how most of my beds, I'll basically come out a bit and then go back in and basically just make long S curves. That's the method to my madness, because they look nice. But then over here you see where we've got this smaller area. So yeah, I do have a smaller angle, but the smaller angle is actually into the garden, and the lawn is the larger angle. So it's not this little tongue. In this garden over here, I just want to show you that I didn't do the S curve. I pretty much just do a straight line, because that's what works. And you know, in theory, the tip of that line out here should probably be another 4 inches straight, and then 4 inches. But what I want you to notice is I still use a nice curve around the edge of this bed. I don't often do 90-degree angles in landscapes, because if you try to turn a mower on a 90-degree angle, it's just going to tear the lawn up, and it's just a pain to do. And honestly, I try not to do like straight edges like you have here either, because the straighter the edge, the harder it is to maintain. But there's always going to be times when a straight edge is the best answer. So, you know, here we've just got a straight line, gentle curve, and then to another straight line. And you know, that's where we were just looking before, where there's the swoop at the end. I just want to show you folks this garden because it's a fairly small garden, and it may be a good example for some of you folks, where what I'm trying to do is go around this stump and just keep all the shrubs and the few perennials I've got here separate. And I think you can just see once again, I've just got this very smooth curve. I did end up going straight, smooth curve, and then around again. And then on this side, I do have a straight line. And usually when I'm edging a straight line, what'll happen is you'll have to go back, if you're using the edging tool, you know, you can put a piece of string and use that as a guide. Or if you're doing it freehand, you'll just go back and tweak it, you know, 1 or 2 times. And then if you're using the weed whacker to maintain a straight edge like that, you'll also, it'll usually take me a time or two. I'll go through it once quickly and do a rough edge of the bed, but then I'll have to go back a time or two and kind of tweak where the edge isn't as straight as I'd like. But I just wanted to show you this example of what a smaller bed would look like for me. And just notice how it's all one curve. It's not like there's a bunch of little tiny curves. I've got one curve at the end, comes in, and then I've got another curve over here, and then it goes around the trees. And then this bed over here is another pretty good example for you of a smaller garden where I've got these daffodils in bloom right now, and the curve comes around, but then I just pop out and I start making my long gradual curves, which kind of give it more interest to me, because if I were to just do a straight line, if I were to just cut a line from the tip of this bed to the tip over there, it would just be this very boring straight line. But it's just a long, slow, gradual curve, very easy to mow, very easy to maintain, and I think it gives a lot of interest. And you'll notice pretty much when I'm edging beds or creating designs for beds, it's just a long gradual curve. How can I get to A to B with a long gradual curve that's gonna look like it fits in. Of course, once we get over here, we're at the neighbor's yard, so we just made a straight line just for the back of the bed. There's no reason to get fancy over here, and then over here as well. You know, it's just a straight line. It does the job. What I want to do now is just kind of walk you along this very long bed coming up, this very long bed line, and kind of explain the method to my madness. And you know, this bed came together over a number of years. So initially the bed line would have come, you know, right through here. And then little by little, I ended up cutting more and more out and making the curve flow, you know, more and more smoothly. The first principle when you're edging a bed is what's the purpose? And for me, the purpose was just to make everything flow together and to keep the garden away from the house a bit. So once you kind of know where the bed has to start and where the bed has to end, you kind of try to figure out how to get between those 2 points in a way that looks best. And quite often I will end up at my own yard and even on jobs I'm working on, you know, I'll look at the edge for weeks or months and, you know, kind of think about where I want it to be, what I want the garden to do before I finally come back and actually cut the edge. The garden here is going to start as a straight line because that's really what's natural. And then we're going to slowly curve around the house. And this bed has slowly moved out. Over time, my beds have slowly moved out because I wanted them to be easier to maintain and to flow better. So you see we've come around and then we're coming in a touch. And then just because of necessity of these boxwood, we're coming back out. And then you can kind of see how it's a long, gradual curve. And I mean, I suppose I could look and, you know, there's always more tweaking you could do. But I think for all intents and purposes, you know, what we've got here is enough to do the job. Here the bed came out because I've got this gutter, you know, coming over, so I had to push things out. And once you knew that, you knew the bed was out, and I always like to kind of come in and out. But I'm coming in and out in a long, gradual way, not like in every 10-foot way. And then over here, there used to be a couple tree stumps in this bed. That's why it's higher in the middle. We just put some dirt on top of it. And again, there's a PG hydrangea here. That's the high point, the focal point of the bed. So I wanted to just kind of move around where the PG hydrangea was. And, you know, just very gradually swoop around. And it wasn't until last year that I actually got tired of mowing this curve. This curve used to be a lot sharper, and there would always be a dead piece of grass where the mower would pivot. So I actually pulled the bed out and made it a much more gradual curve so I can just kind of come through with the mower in one shot and work my way through. And then we'll talk about the fence in a minute, but I've got the edge about a foot off the fence. And then just out of sheer necessity, the garden has to stop somewhere. This ended up kind of being just one long gradual curve around these daffodils. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to move this curve, the garden used to go behind the daffodils, but what I'm going to do is end up curving that in front of the feeders and make the feeders part of the garden as well. Nothing bothers me more than seeing somebody install a brand new fence and then over the course of the next year, 2, 3 years, either the person who owns the house or the company that's hired to mow the lawn ends up just hitting that weed whacker into the edge of the fence. And if it's a wooden fence, they'll end up digging like a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of wood at the bottom and just creating this mess. So what I like to do wherever I have a fence in the landscape is just create an edge about a foot out. And, you know, this should be a straight edge, but it's not perfect. But just create that edge like a foot away from the fence, put some mulch in front of it or keep it clean dirt like I have here. But, you know, just keep the mowers away from the fences on both sides, so the mower doesn't hit them by accident, the weed whacker doesn't hit them by accident, and hopefully there's less chance of shooting wet grass onto the fence as well. Now, if you've got trees in your landscape like I've got here, the best thing to do is to just create a circle around the tree. And you really want to push the edge of the bed, farther out. You want a more gradual, larger circle than a small circle. It's better for the tree because you're going to disturb the roots less, driving the mower over the roots, cultivating around the roots. But it also just looks better. So the first thing I want you to notice on this tree, which has the mulch ring around it, is there's no weed whacker marks at all. Nobody jabbed a weed whacker into the bark of this tree and knocked it off, which is key. So I highly recommend never leaving a tree in a lawn without a mulch ring around it or just a bed around it. And the bigger the better. I'll just get a tape measure and a paint gun. And for this one, I probably measured like 5 or 6 feet off the tree. You put a dot, you move along like 3 feet, measure from the center of the tree or measure from the edge of the tree, you put a dot, and you do that all the way around. Once you got a bunch of dots around the tree, just take your paint gun and connect the dots. And your circle around the tree isn't gonna be perfect, but once you've got a rough idea of where it is, you can remove all the grass, edge it out, and then go back and smooth the curve out a bit. And that's what I did here, and that's also what I did over there. So here's an example of what not to do, is I've got this little tongue of grass between these two rings around the trees, and I can't get my mower on that tongue of grass, so I either have to drive over the bed to mow it, I have to come out with a weed whacker to mow it, or I just end up leaving it, and then I have this one patch of tall grass bothering me all summer. So I guess we'll say that I left it this way just so you folks don't, you folks see what not to do. But what I really should do here is connect these two, almost make this bed into like a figure 8, where we just pull the edge in on the inside and the outside and get rid of all this grass in the middle, and then probably plant some kind of a ground cover around this bed. I've got some Waldestinia over there, which would grow very nicely, so maybe eventually we start planting the Waldestinia. But if you can help it, try to avoid these little narrow tongues of grass, because just like at the edge of the bed when you're edging, these little narrow tongues, they never look right. They're the first to dry out. If I come with the weed whacker, it's not going to match the lawn. So avoid it if you can. And if you make one, such is life, but have a plan to someday kind of smooth things out. This is the last area I want to show you. And I can't really say that this is an example of what looks great, but sometimes you just have to work with what you got. So here, I have this gravel drive. I wanted to start the bed right off the gravel drive, so it's one continuous line. That's another thing I like to do is if you can pick up a line and just keep that line going, whether it's from the gravel drive or the sidewalk or whatever, it always looks more natural. Even though you're going from gravel to grass, it always looks more natural to pick up that line. And another thing I really like to do is if I had a sidewalk here that was 4 feet wide and a bed started on the other side and cut across the sidewalk, pick up that same line on the other side of the sidewalk, and it just makes everything, it gives unity, it pulls everything together when you got those lines going from one side of the walk to the other, or lines matching up as you see through my landscape. Hopefully you saw a little bit of the lines matching up. But over here, I like the way the outer line goes. I just start the gravel bed, I sweep around. I've got some hosta coming up here soon, and then I wanted to get around these maple trees. But then I've got these 2 maple trees, which I just wanted to do something so I don't hit the trees with the weed whacker. And again, notice number 1, that there's no weed whacker marks on the tree. And number 2, There's a nice flare to these trees because they haven't been buried by mulch or dirt. So this is, I can't say this is the perfect tree well, or mulch ring, but this is what I got. All right, folks, well, that's gonna do it for this one. I just wanted to kind of try to pass on some tips for edging beds, and feel free to go through the video a few times and just kind of watch the bed lines and get a feel for, for those gradual S-curves. And like all bed lines for me, it's not like I get them right the first time. I'll usually edge them out and then go back and tweak it. And then every season I'll tweak it a little bit more until I get it pretty much where I want it. And, I guess that's the idea, is just keep working at it, but try to work at it with gradual S-curves. Don't leave like a small tongue of grass sticking out anywhere. I haven't fed the birds yet, and they're kind of getting obnoxious. Slow, gradual curves, gradual S-curves. Try not to leave a narrow tongue of grass. Try to avoid sharp corners if at all possible, because it's a pain to mow sharp corners. You want a gradual, easy flowing line. And, try to edge around your trees as well and leave a nice generous circle around your trees. Those are the tips I wanted to start with. I'm sure I'll think of more after I'm done with the video. But what I'll do is I'll leave a couple links down below the video about how to cut an edge if you're cutting an edge for the first time. And then I've also got a video about how to use a weed whacker to maintain beds. And I think that's the greatest tip of all, is to use your weed whacker to touch up the edge of your beds through the season, because it's going to make a night and day difference as far as looking better, but also just being a lot less work to keep your gardens looking nice. So thanks for watching today, folks, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.